What is SCP Pandemic? What features does it have now and in the future? And should you get into the early access? Hi, I'm Akane, a VTuber and Twitch streamer, and I've been playing the closed pre-beta of SCP Pandemic since its launch in December. SCP Pandemic is developed by Afray Studios and runs on Unreal Engine 4. It is described as a hardcore cooperative first-person tactical shooter. The development of the game has been inspired by Insurgency Sandstorm, SWAT 4, Left 4 Dead, Half-Life 1 and many other titles. Story-wise, the game is based on SCP-5000. You'll be going against the SCP Foundation and their ongoing attempt of omnicide. The starting target is their Psy-Z program that produces artificial mutants of known SCP entities. Current playable division is UIU, but more have been planned for the future like GOC and GRU. By the time this video goes up, SCP Pandemic may already be out in early access. You may be wondering what the game has to offer right now and if it's worth jumping into. To help you make the decision, here are some features and mechanics briefly. Since SCP Pandemic is a tactical shooter, you can expect slower, more deliberate movement in general compared to movement shooters or more arcadey FPS. Sprinting and leaning are in the game. Some more exotic movement and stance mechanics include candid sights, point shooting and low ready. Also, you can kick doors and... There are about this many weapons in the game now. Each can be customized with attachments like sight suppressors, lasers and grips. SCP Pandemic has mag retention, similar to Insurgency Sandstorm where your half-empty magazines aren't dumped but kept for possible future. Flashlight and NVG are both available. Oh, and yes, there's bullet penetration. As a brief side note, here are the currently available game modes. Recommended co-op player team size is 4, but can go quite a bit higher. Let's move to enemies that you currently face in the campaign. Most of the fodder is comprised of Psy-Z infector fledglings and staff zombies. While a couple lone Zeds are easy to dispose of, in bigger groups they have potential to overwhelm an unwary player. For the less feral type of enemies, we have the security guards and D-Class Rebellion from the Foundation. Safe to expect them to be armed. As for pricing, SCP Pandemic is planned to be $20 in early access and $30 for full release far down the line when there is more content. Afray is hoping the full release to be out around 2 years after early access launch. Before you jump on the bandwagon, however, there are a few things that are important to mention. More SCP and Psy-Z entities is a massive goal for the developers for the early access. They have stated that zombies are an easy point to start off with, which is why you'll see them in the game first. Story, world building and atmosphere is to be massively improved. Examples given are the D-Class Rebellion, 50th Church, the omnicidal efforts, and so on. The current gameplay loop does not encourage replayability, and it is to be improved, although personally I still find much joy going through the currently available campaign. Of course, bugs, numerous bugs. I have no doubt in mind that the early access launch will have a fair amount of those. The early access is a continuation of the closed beta, and there will be performance issues, software crashes, and incomplete content. Afray still desires to go forth with this plan, but know full well that the project is far from perfect and do not want anyone to think it's even remotely complete in the grand scheme of things. As I've closely been following trends in the video game industry, undoubtedly many will think SCP Pandemic sucks in its current state. Why am I still on board with this though? Why do I have any faith in this project? Remember when I mentioned candid sights, low ready, night vision, magazine retention, staff zombies or D-Class Rebellion, door kicking and the other kicking? None of those were a thing when the closed beta started. In the matter of a couple months, SCP Pandemic has had so many updates that I stopped counting. I'm pretty sure these guns were in the game either at beta launch. The developers have been active, transparent about their plans, and constantly communicating throughout the beta. I don't see this changing anytime soon. And if you're interested in modding the game, it is possible. There are no official tools for that, however. Of course, I'm always pleased to see new co-op games, tactical shooters, and games that feature horror elements or darker subject matters. A game that can offer all of these in the same package is already beyond my expectations. The presentation is intriguing and I just really like zombies. SCP Pandemic is a promising co-op tactical shooter. While the early access is going to be rough, it is still a good glimpse at the future with some basic mechanics to show off what kind of game it's going to be. If you aren't sure whether to get in on the early access or not, Afray states, "We seriously don't recommend getting in if you want a solid experience immediately. Wait and see how it goes." Afray has a development roadmap on Trello, which I'll link in the description along with some other relevant things if you are still curious. This concludes the video. If you enjoyed this video or found it informational, give it a like. It's genuinely helpful to me, so big thanks. It's a bit of an unusual type of content for this channel, but I genuinely enjoy this game and wanted to show it off. If there are details you are curious about, leave a comment. Otherwise, please have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.